thank you for joining us today. We'll meet the three finalists for Police Chief of Cedar Falls. Candidates were solicited nationwide in February, and of the 5 applicants, these 3 met the listed requirements in the solicitation. The 3 finalists are now meeting for conversations with civic leaders, surrounding law enforcement leaders, community stakeholder groups, and senior city managers. After taking in feedback from each of these groups about the candidates, I'll send to the City Council a nomination for one of these finalists. The City Council will then consider approving my nomination in the weeks ahead, and we will continue to keep the community updated about the process. The COVID-19 pandemic has made this process a little more complex. I would have preferred to host an informal meet and greet session in the council chambers for you to connect with each of the finalists, but to avoid the spread of coronavirus, I'm instead recording this video series for you. I've invited the public to send in questions to me to ask each finalist on your behalf, and I'll ask these questions now. Thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to talking with you and learning a little bit more about you today.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that.
Certainly. So I'll go right into the questions here. How has your past experience prepared you for this critical leadership role?
So I've been very fortunate in my career to have experienced a lot of things, particularly in police work in general. When you talk about high critical incidents, whether it be shootings or any type of other major incident, presidential visits, things like that. In addition to just community engagement, I've been very fortunate coming from a city where those experiences are many and plentiful, some good, some bad, and obviously those bad ones you learn from and grow from. And fast forward to today, where I take on more of a even more responsibility. It's really prepared me, to liaison with city officials and other government officials. So that really, for me, is what makes me say, you know what, police chief, I think I want to do that. I know I can do it, and I'm prepared to do it.
Okay. This question was suggested by Cindy Bozen. How would you seek to strengthen police and community engagement in Cedar Falls?
Oh, that's a great question. So I am huge on collaboration with the community. And what I mean by that is I don't believe that we as a police department or any police department anywhere should just shove down police services to the community and say, here's what you're going to get, take it or leave it. I believe in it is continually updating and messaging and communicating with the community and getting their input and their buy-in and how they want their police department run. It would be consistency and just doing things that I know work.
Okay, thank you. A question suggested by our library director, Kelly Stern. She asks, what's a significant challenge facing our community, and how will you use your influence as police chief to facilitate solutions?
I hate to say, because Cedar Falls has done a great job in keeping the community safe, but like any community, there are issues that arise. And I think one of the challenges for Cedar Falls is the College Hill area. And what I mean by that is, unfortunately, there have been some folk that, don't live in the city, but come to the city and commit nefarious acts. And how do we address those acts and properly address those acts? And to do so, we really need to work with our other external community partners, our stakeholders, and kind of look at that, in my opinion, as a holistic approach of all type of alternatives. Because with any issue in the community, we're not going to arrest our way out of it. We have to have buy-in and collaboration between community members, business owners, county officials, other city officials. So as I look at it, off the top of my head, College Hill would be one of the things I would say would be a challenge in addressing some of the violence that's occurred there as of recent, and trying to mitigate that.
Okay. This position requires an understanding of goal setting and strategic planning. How would you incorporate strategic planning into your decision-making process as police chief?
Absolutely. So my decisions should be guided around, number one, community goals and objectives, and also making sure that it's ethically and morally sound and legally sound. So all my strategic planning, which I hope to do a 2 to 5 year strategic plan and vision, will be around the objectives set by council and the community as a whole, and making sure we set benchmarks to achieve those objectives.
Okay, thank you. A question suggested by Truman Stone was, in our professional lives, we've all experienced mistakes and failures. Can you give an example of a professional mistake or failure and what you learned from that experience?
Absolutely. Professional mistake. I think about in supervision, in my time as a manager, one of the mistakes I made was being too close to personnel. And what I mean by that is I was asked to be a change agent, to really engage with staff, and that's my leadership style, is to really engage. But as a manager, sometimes you can't be the joking manager, if you will, with subordinates, and then understanding your crowd and your audience. So for me, it's been really knowing who I'm talking to and understanding where they're at in life, and engaging and addressing and toning my tenor to them as a whole. But again, that's depending on the crowd and things like that. So for me, I learned that, hey, you got to really understand your audience, and speak appropriately and accordingly to that audience. It was a learning experience that I have learned from and grown from.
Another question, actually, I'll move forward to how have you utilized the expertise of subordinates in areas where you're not an expert? Absolutely.
I always tell my staff, we can't be great at everything, so pick one or two things and be great at those. And that's what I do. There are some things that I'm just not great at, and I want to, number one, mentor and really help flower those employees that have those expertises that I may not have, because I can't be the best at everything, and I need to rely upon and trust my staff that they're going to help me out and succeed and help the organization out and succeed. So it's really just trusting my staff, knowing them personally, not just as from a chief or a captain or lieutenant or what have you, but knowing them and their goals and mentoring them and helping shaping them so that can be the best that they can be. And then ultimately it promotes and helps grow the organization.
Okay. This question was suggested by Nicholas Rosauer. He asks, what should the role of law enforcement be in addressing our current mental health epidemic?
That's a tough one. And when I say that, because there are a lot of instances that society has called police or expected police to be the fixer of all problems. Mental health is not necessarily a police problem. And what I mean by that is we should be facilitators of helping them get the assistance they need, and not as the authoritative body, if you will, to come and say, no, we're going to arrest you for some unknown reason or whatever reason it may be. Obviously there are some times where an arrest, we have no choice, but if the root cause is the mental health, we're not doing anyone any good by just arresting them and putting them in jail. We really have to work with our external partners, community health, other resources within the community, homeless shelters, or whatever it may be, to kind of help address the root cause and go from there. I just don't believe that police should be the primary solution to mental health.
So this follows on to the last question, also suggested by Nicholas Rosauer. How much mental health crisis training should Cedar Falls police officers receive to effectively respond to mental health related calls and incidents?
So I envision, I personally am a certified CIT, which is Crisis Intervention Technician, or Crisis Intervention Team member. I would like to see at minimum 40 hours of CIT training for all officers, and then ongoing updated training as time goes on. Because what I would ultimately like to see is that police officers, again, it would be a co-response between police and some type of mental health professional to incidents where we're involved.
A question suggested by TJ Frine was, when you've disagreed with a superior, when have you disagreed with a superior, and how did you resolve this disagreement?
I'm very communicative. I love interacting and talking with people, and if there's a disagreement, we have to sit down and talk it out. We may not get up from the table agreeing, but we need to sit down, discuss our differences, our thought processes and why we came to that conclusion. And at the end of the day, it's what's best for the organization. We have to continue doing our jobs and doing it well. So at the end of the day, it has to be a conclusion that we continue our mission.
Okay. Can you provide an example?
Yes, so I personally had a supervisor where I felt as the supervisor did not have faith in my skills and abilities as a first line supervisor. So what I did with that, my supervisor at the time was I pulled him or her aside. It was a him, I just say him, and spoke with him very honestly and genuinely and how I felt. Because oftentimes if we don't speak, how does that supervisor know he could have known he didn't, he wasn't doing that or didn't see that happening. But I let him know how I felt and why I felt that way and what it seemed to me. And we kind of discussed that out and worked through it.
Okay. Another question suggested by Mr. Frine was, how do you see this police chief role differently than in other cities, since you'll be working for a public safety director rather than for a city administrator or a mayor?
I don't see any difference, and here's why. We all ultimately have someone we answer to, and for me, as a police chief here, it would be a collaboration between myself and the public safety director, and it's nice that the public safety director has experience in police and fire. So I don't see any difference in that. At the end of the day, we have a superior to answer to. It's just in this exception, the superior has a background and experience and knowledge of what's going on and what dealings was occurring within the department.
Okay. And the last question I have that's a written question is, to whom is the police chief most accountable and why?
Most accountable? That's a great question.
Also from our library director, Kelly Stern.
I would say most accountable to the citizens of the community. Granted, he or she is accountable to their direct superior, in this instance, director, or in some other instances, the mayor or council. But I think ultimately the citizens, because they are relying upon him or her to guide and manage their safety, right? Whether that be fire, police, or ambulance, or what have you. So, although administratively it's important to be responsible to the mayor or council, but ultimately I do believe the citizens had that say-so and should have some say-so in how or who or how you're responsible to them.
Okay. So that's the end of my formal questions. With a little bit of extra time left, I always like to ask, what's been your favorite or most rewarding experience so far as a law enforcement officer?
I've been very fortunate to do a lot of things in police work, and all the things you kind of see on TV, although they may not be exactly how they are in real life, but those things I've done, car chases and chasing suspects and retrieving guns, illegal guns off the street. But for me, the most rewarding thing has been when I was able to, and I shouldn't say I, because it was a collaborative effort between me, the officers I supervised, and the residents in this particular neighborhood, where we actually improved the quality of life for an entire street. This street had some issues with drug dealing, open-air drug dealing, gun violence from shootings occurring, and then just general nuisance quality of life issues like loud parties late at night, fights in the middle of the street. And being able to collaborate with those residents in that area, in that street, and actually see the change over a course of several months of quality of life, that was by far the best and more rewarding and fulfilling than any time I've got a gun off the street, to be honest with you. Actually being able to affect someone's life, especially their personal quality of life. It's one thing to go somewhere at work or visit somewhere and have an unenjoyable experience because we can come home to our sanctuary, if you will. But it's another thing when your sanctuary is under attack, under siege, and to be able to change that around for those residents, that was the best.
Excellent. So I'll ask now, are there any questions you wished I had asked, or is there anything you'd like to add?
I'll add that one of the reasons I want to come to Cedar Falls, it is very similar to the area I lived in the state of Michigan. And I miss this atmosphere of traditional policing. I miss the public safety model. And Cedar Falls, one thing that I've noticed in my research is people come here and stay. People either come here and stay, or they leave and immediately come back after they're done doing what they're doing, or they're born here and never leave. And what I've seen is people take an active investment in the city, and I like that. And because that shows me that people care about the city. People want to see the city grow and prosper. And not all cities have that active participation, or that desire, or that willingness from the citizens to actually be active participants in the growth and the prosperity and seeing that their city does well. So that excites me. That really does excite me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming in to interview with us, Lieutenant Turner, and look forward to being able to talk a little bit more with you later on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This has been one of 3 conversations with the Cedar Falls Police Chief finalists. I invite you to watch the other 2 videos and send your thoughts to me at rob.green@cedarfalls.com. Thanks for doing the work to be informed and engaged residents.